Trump's trade war with Canada is spiraling into chaos, and the cracks are starting to show.
Canada-U.S. trade.
Mr. Speaker, I remember the Leader of the Opposition and some of his colleagues criticizing for the government for not having enough direct face-to-face engagement with the President of the United States. So good news, Mr. Speaker. The President has invited the Prime Minister to a working meeting tomorrow in Washington, followed by a working lunch. Obviously, Mr. Speaker, the conversation will center on trade issues and what we want to do to protect Canadian industries and Canadian workers, at the same time building an economy in North America that's in the interest of both countries. And the discussion will also talk about a series of other international issues.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Surely, after promising to negotiate a win, to have a deal by July the 21st, the Prime Minister's not flying all the way to Washington, D.C. just to have lunch. By the sounds of it, that's all they are going to accomplish, Mr. Speaker. We've seen since he promised this win, American tariffs on Canada have doubled. The Prime Minister has caved on counter tariffs, on the digital services tax, and on everything else, and 86.
Behind the facade of tough talk and aggressive tariff threats, the Trump administration is scrambling for damage control. The president who promised to bring manufacturing back to America has instead created a web of economic pain that's now strangling his own supporters. It's not just Canada feeling the heat anymore. American farmers are begging for bailouts, automakers are hemorrhaging billions, and manufacturers across the country are pleading for relief from Trump's own policies. The question isn't whether Trump's trade war has failed, it's how badly he's willing to let it burn before admitting defeat. To understand how we got here, we need to look at Trump's obsession with tariffs as his weapon of choice. Trade deadlines came and went without new agreements. New tariffs were slapped on Canada with increasing fury. The relationship deteriorated with each passing month, including Trump's outrage over Canada's digital services tax. When Trump announced in June that he was ending all trade discussions with Canada over the federal government's digital services tax, it wasn't negotiation, it was economic extortion. A few days later, Canada dropped the tax, but the damage to the relationship was already done. This pattern of threats and escalation became Trump's signature move. After making progress in trade talks on the sidelines of the G7 summit in June, both sides announced they'd set a goal of reaching a new broad Canada-US trade and security agreement within 30 days. But here's where Trump's incompetence really shines through. The original 30-day deadline was extended by Trump himself, who then threatened to increase tariffs unless a deal was reached by August 1st. When talks failed to reach a breakthrough, surprise, surprise, border security and fentanyl-related tariffs increased from 25 to 35%. Think about that for a moment. Trump set his own deadline, failed to meet it, then punished Canada for his own failure by raising tariffs even higher. It's like watching a toddler throw a tantrum, except this toddler has the pew. Where to destroy entire industries. The human cost of Trump's trade tantrum is staggering. The aluminum and steel industries have faced crushing 50% tariffs for months. Steel production across the country dropped in May by 30%. These aren't just statistics on a spreadsheet. These are real jobs disappearing, real families struggling to make ends meet, real communities watching their economic foundations crumble. The federal government recently announced a $400 million loan to Algoma Steel just so it can continue operations and transition away from the U.S. market. Companies are literally having to be bailed out because of Trump's policies. This is what winning looks like in Trump's America, forcing your closest ally to prop up industries you've deliberately targeted. But here's where the story gets really interesting. Trump's trade war isn't just hurting Canada, it's devastating American businesses too. American farmers are clamoring for bailouts. Bourbon producers are pushing for tariff relief. Automakers are asking for a break of their own. Meanwhile, new polling shows an increasing share of the American public believes the economy is on the wrong track. The Trump administration knows the costs of the trade war will become more apparent as it drags on, and the pressure is mounting. The auto industry provides perhaps the most damning evidence of Trump's failed strategy. At the top of the list of those suffering is the auto industry, which has been clobbered by tariffs on parts. Ford's quarterly earnings indicated it will pay $2 billion in tariff-related costs through the first half of this year. Ford CEO Jim Farley didn't mince words when he spoke to Yahoo Finance at a conference in Detroit last week. He said it's frustrating because we're the most American auto company and we export the most, and yet we have this $2 billion headwind, which prevents me from investing even more in the U.S. Let that sink in. The most American auto company is being punished by America's own tariff policies. Trump promised to bring manufacturing back, but instead he's making it more expensive for American companies to manufacture anything at all. The irony would be hilarious if it weren't so destructive. Now Trump is in a bind. His tough guy approach has backfired spectacularly. Trump himself has acknowledged the natural conflict between the two countries, admitting that they want a car company and I want a car company. They want steel and we want steel.
More complicated maybe than any other agreement we have on trade because, we have natural conflict. We also have mutual love. We have great love for each other. I love this. I love Canada and the people of Canada. And Mark feels the same way about here. The problem we have is that they want a car company and I want a car company, meaning the U.S. wants a car company. And they want steel and we want steel. And, so in other countries, they're very far away. And there's no problem. You can compete and you can do. We don't like to compete because we sort of hurt each other when we compete. And so we have a natural conflict. It's a natural business conflict. Nothing wrong with it. And I think we've come a long way over the last few months, actually, in terms of that relationship. So when it comes to trade, the United States was always giving everything. They gave everything to Canada. They would let car companies leave here and go to Canada. But that hurts the United States. And, other presidents didn't see that. They weren't business-oriented. They might have been good politicians in some cases, not in all cases. They were bad at both. But it's a very natural conflict, and it's something that we're working on.
Canada has offered a lot of compromise this summer. Are you willing today to offer some compromise to Canada, maybe on steel, on aluminum?
Well, we've made compromise, and we've made.
But this isn't just about competition, it's about Trump's fundamental misunderstanding of how modern economies work. Trade isn't a zero-sum game where one country's gain is another's loss. The pressure on Trump to find an exit strategy is becoming unbearable. Some experts have suggested the president cut a deal now before things get worse. One expert hypothesized that a USMCA truce would be politically shrewd ahead of the November 2026 midterms. They noted it would end the trade war with the two biggest U.S. trade partners and stabilize prices and create conditions for business investment. Even Trump's own allies are telling him to cut his losses and make peace. The fact that he's even considering tariff relief exposes the fundamental weakness of his position. But here's what makes the situation even more absurd. Kitchen cabinets are now apparently a matter of national security.
And by the way, it's not just steel and aluminum. It includes autos, where there's a mixed bag of tariffs. It includes copper, nickel, now pharma is coming, and the latest ones, which I think are outrageous, are on kitchen cabinets and furniture. On the guise that they represent a national security threat to the United States of America. So I think Prime Minister Carney should remind President Trump that you need to have a little balance here. Otherwise, you're going to be the laughingstock of the world with some of the tariffs that you're putting on. He also will remind President Trump that this is probably the largest, most complex trading relationship in the world. It's almost evenly balanced. In fact, it's heavily in the U.S. favor because they receive our raw materials, which they turn into jobs. So they're well advantaged from this. Not only that, but we have a large defense security relationship with America. There's no other country in NORAD except Canada. There's no other place in the world where the United States would have less of a military presence than the U.S.-Canada border.
Trump has expanded his tariff list beyond steel and aluminum to include autos, copper, nickel, pharmaceuticals, and yes, kitchen cabinets and furniture. He's justifying these tariffs on national security grounds, turning the United States into what one former ambassador called the laughingstock of the world. Meanwhile, Trump continues to display his authoritarian tendencies in other areas. When discussing crime in Chicago, Trump casually mentioned invoking the Insurrection Act, stating if the governor can't do the job, we'll do the job.
Mr. President, can we talk about Portland for a second? Are you planning to invoke the Insurrection Act? And that would be, a very long-standing law that's been on the books.
Yeah, well, it's been invoked before, as you know. If you look at Chicago, Chicago's a great city where there's a lot of crime. And if the governor can't do the job, we'll do the job. It's all very simple. They probably had 50 murders in Chicago over the last 5, 6, 7 months. Many people were shot. And then the governor gets up and he says, well, we can handle it. They can't handle it. They don't know what they're doing. The mayor is grossly incompetent. He's at a 4% approval rating in Chicago. He's at a 4%, lowest approval rating, lower than even de Blasio had, which is hard to believe in New York. I thought de Blasio would always maintain that record, but the Chicago guy is even lower. So I think that we want safe cities. If you look at D.C., you would right now, Mark, you could go out, take your family out to dinner, you could walk right down the middle of the street. There is no crime in D.C. When I got here, this place was a raging hellhole where people would come from Canada, people would come from other places and end up getting shot. Nobody's being shot. The National Guard's been unbelievable.
He called Chicago's mayor grossly incompetent with a 4% approval rating and claimed there is no crime in D.C. since federal intervention with the National Guard. This is the same man who's supposed to be negotiating complex trade agreements. Canada, on the other hand, has been playing this perfectly. While Trump has been throwing economic tantrums, Canada has shown remarkable restraint. Canada rolled back counter tariffs on U.S. goods, partly because it hopes the White House will view the move as an act of goodwill. Prime Minister Carney rescinded a tax on big U.S. technology firms at Trump's request and dropped retaliatory tariffs to try to advance talks. They've been the adults in the room while Trump acts like a spoiled child. But even Canada's patience has limits. Ontario Premier Doug Ford delivered a forceful message to Prime Minister Carney ahead of his meeting with Trump, saying, "We will not waver." A message to the Prime Minister. "You're going down there Tuesday. You better fight like hell. Don't roll over and keep fighting."
Trump. "We will not waver." A message to the Prime Minister. "You're going down there Tuesday. You better fight like hell. Don't roll over and keep fighting."
The frustration is palpable, and who can blame them? The unpredictability that defines Trump's approach makes any negotiation nearly impossible. Sources characterize the ongoing trade talks between Canada and the U.S. as positive, but there remains a nervousness that comes with Trump-related events, given how unpredictable the president has proven to be. How can you negotiate with someone who changes the rules every 5 minutes? Meanwhile, the economic damage keeps mounting. President Trump's tariff regime has hit the Canadian economy hard, with unemployment hitting 7.1% in August, the highest level since May 2016, excluding the pandemic period. But the pain isn't limited to Canada. There are signs of mounting pressure on the American side. It's clear that the U.S. economy is softening under the weight of the administration's tariffs. The Trump administration is clearly looking for ways to mitigate damage done by retaliatory tariffs targeting American farm exports. What's particularly revealing is how Trump talks about the relationship now. When he sits down with Prime Minister Carney, Trump tries to project an image of strength while desperately seeking a face-saving exit. He speaks of mutual love but competitive business interests, acknowledging that geographic proximity creates unique challenges.
MCA. So I think the Prime Minister is walking into a very difficult and frankly volatile situation.
Potentially hostile. You know, you say that there seems to be some particular animosity. Why do you say that, and why do you think that is?
Well, there's a lot of different theories, but, you know, well, let's look at it from what appears to be the Trump's perspective. He actually seems to believe that Canada was part of this unfair global economy that was stealing manufacturing jobs from the United States. I mean, the truth is, of course, we've had highly integrated economies, that the U.S. runs a trade surplus against Canada if you exclude the energy that they buy from us at a steep discount, which they depend on. Canada Canada is the source of 65% of U.S. oil imports. And so without that, gas prices would be demonstrably higher in the U.S. So
But this isn't about geography, it's about Trump's fundamental inability to understand that trade partnerships benefit both sides. And then there's Trump's most bizarre obsession, his repeated references to Canada becoming the 51st state of America.
We call the Golden Dome Missile Defense Shield. It'll be the most sophisticated in the world. You watched it do well until they had some problems at the end with a little bit of a lack of ammunition, defensive ammunition, but they've got that taken care of. But I tell you, it's what we're doing is so good, and we deserve it. You know, we help other countries with it. We don't have it ourselves. And Canada called me a couple of weeks ago. They want to be part of it. To which I said, well, why don't you just join our country? You become 51, become the 51st state.
During Carney's first visit to the U.S. in May, Trump almost immediately brought up annexation in the Oval Office, pronouncing a union between Canada and the U.S. as meant to be. When Carney responded that some places are never for sale, Trump replied with never say never. This week, he floated the idea again while speaking to military leaders. This isn't diplomacy, this is the behavior of an unstable autocrat who thinks he can just absorb neighboring countries. It's not just offensive, it's delusional, and it reveals how fundamentally unserious Trump is about actually solving the trade issues he created. The reality is that Trump's trade war has been an unmitigated disaster by every measure. It hasn't brought manufacturing back to America. It hasn't improved the trade balance. It hasn't made America more competitive. All it has done is damage relationships, hurt workers on both sides of the border, and expose Trump's fundamental incompetence at governing. Now faced with mounting pressure from his own supporters and the obvious failure of his policies, Trump is desperately trying to find a face-saving way out. Government sources speaking to media outlets say they are cautiously optimistic the Prime Minister can broker some steel tariff relief when he meets with Trump. One expert on Canada-U.S. relations said it's unlikely Carney will leave D.C. empty-handed this time around. She said Carney wouldn't be going for a second Oval Office meeting in less than 6 months without the expectation of delivering some progress on the trade file. But here's the thing. Any deal Trump makes now will be from a position of weakness, not strength. His own policies have failed. His own supporters are demanding relief. His own economy is suffering. The motion we're seeing is Trump running away from his own failed policies. The irony is that Trump could have avoided this entire mess if he had just approached trade like a normal president instead of a reality TV character. But that's not who Trump is. He's a man who sees every relationship as a zero-sum game, every negotiation as a chance to humiliate the other side, and every policy as a chance to show how tough he is. The result has been a trade war that has hurt everyone, achieved nothing, and left Trump scrambling for a way out of his own mess. The man who promised to make America great again has instead made America isolated, unpredictable, and untrustworthy. As Trump sits down with Carney this week, desperately hoping for some kind of face-saving deal, remember this. Every concession he makes, every tariff he reduces, every olive branch he extends is an admission that his entire approach was wrong from the beginning. The great deal maker has been exposed as nothing more than a destructive force who breaks things and then begs others to help him clean up the mess. Trump's steel tariff scheme hasn't just backfired, it's blown up in his face, and now the whole world can see that the emperor of trade wars has no clothes.